Congress passed the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act of 2008, or H.R. 4040, a retroactive rule mandating that all items sold for use by children under 12 must be tested by an independent party for lead and phthalates, which are chemicals used to make plastics more pliable. All untested items, regardless of lead content, are to be declared banned hazardous products. The Consumer Product Safety Commission, CPSC, has already determined the law applies to every children's item on shelves, not just items made beginning February 10th. This regulation could force thousands of businesses, especially smaller ones that cannot afford the cost of testing, to throw away truckloads of children's clothing, books, toys, furniture, and other children's items, and even force them to close their doors. This is what we're looking at a few days out. Valerie Jacobson and her husband Paul support their family of 13 by selling literature at Jacobson Books in Clinton, Wisconsin. Her family has contracts with local libraries to buy and sell overstocked books, an arrangement that draws income for both parties. However, Jacobson told WND, World Net Daily, that lead testing is estimated to cost $100 to $400 for each of her used children's books. And because she does not buy in bulk, and each batch of merchandise is required to be tested, she has to test the products individually. Now, how can you afford to sell a children's item that costs you $100 to $400 each to test by law? It's not possible. I talked about how Susan's gross manufacturers would force the little ones out of business so that they could have all of the business come to them. Well, that's what our past president signed into law. There's a big difference between me and Walmart or Toys R Us. They'll have a batch of 50,000. Everything I have is a batch of 1. I'm looking at a testing cost of $1.2 million for products that only sell for 15,000. I don't want to stop selling children's books on February 9th, she says. I need the income. We provide a lot of reading for a lot of little children. And we went into this business because I thought books were good for children's mental development. That opinion hasn't changed. The government's ruling is essentially saying they're hazardous for children's mental development because they might contain lead. It doesn't matter whether it contains lead or not. You have to test it whether it does or not to prove that it doesn't. Children's secondhand clothing, like products sold by Goodwill, are banned to be sold. If Goodwill sells these items, just like the other merchants, they could be strapped with a penalty. I'm trying to scan to see the price of the penalty. $100,000 in fines and jail term up to 5 years for a violation. So, you wonder why in the last 5 months so many of these toy stores, big toy stores are selling out the inventory, reducing it to ridiculous price and getting rid of it, going out of business, because They don't want to be strapped with inventory that they have to now discard after February 10th. Now, what happens to the economy when you put all the toy stores, small and medium toy stores, and all the used clothing folks, where nobody can sell used children's clothes that may have plastic or whatever on it? They can't sell tennis shoes that may have plastic or whatever on it. They can't sell books that may have a plastic part or plastic and thread, under penalty of a $100,000 fine and 5 years in jail. What does that do to the jobless rate? These are laws. That law was passed in August last year, August 2008, signed by your outgoing president. When I say that the damage that's been done and being done to this country is not repairable, these are the kinds of things I'm talking about. And this is only the tip of the iceberg. I'm not going to waste time trying to show you the rest of the iceberg. I'm just showing you the tip so that you understand. When I give directives, when I make decisions, it's not ill-informed, and it is God's inspiration and His direction by revelation. Now, as bad as that may be, that creates a wonderful opportunity for us. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And for those of you who are short-sighted and don't see it, I'm going to explain to you what it is. So more of you have smiles on your face instead of crying about all these jobs that's going to be lost. You see, do I need to stop? Oh, you can't hear? Batteries? I think our battery died. I can hear the difference in that right away. All right, so I'm going through all of this. I'm going through this exercise today, in this weekend, with two objectives in mind. One, to help you to understand that things are changing detrimentally for the nation and the world. And two, just as God promised in the scripture that He'd provide a way out, a way of escape, He is doing so. You have to check and find out where you can get reliable information and direction. That's your job. And if it's not here, I suggest wherever that place is where you need to be finding your way. Because things are changing detrimentally very fast, and they will change even faster through 2009 and 2010. Some of the things that I recommended to be done, that I encouraged to be done, that I suggested to be done, beginning in 96, 97, 98, 99, 2000, 2001, 2, 3, many have ignored. Now it's not possible to make provision that could have been made during that time. Those who are not around to get those instructions, God will make provision for you as you make application. Those who were and just failed to, it's going to be an expensive proposition for you to try to get up. That's the reality. But if you don't make an effort to get up, it's not going to be impossible. But if you don't make an effort to get up, then you're resolving to be among those who suffer, who were never told, who were never warned, who never heard the voice, Elohim's voice of prophecy and instruction. Those of you who did heed to the ability that you had to do so, you have a great spirit of thankfulness because you realize the preparation that you've made had you way ahead of the curve. And now you're talking about putting icing on a cake rather than trying to make a cake in terms of provision. One of the things to be mindful of is that I will not be, since most of my communication to you is going to be through administration, or once we get the internet site up, which I hope to be, well, God willing, will be a reality before I go. It's going to be a medium of a communication so that you'll know what to be doing, when to be doing, through the confidential mediums of communication that Elohim puts in place. I am not going to, nor do I intend to, explain why when I give instruction, when I give direction, when I give warning. I will not be explaining why. I'm going through this process as a part of this workshop so that you have the ability to understand what's behind the information that I give. That it's not that I'm sitting down listening for voices out of nowhere. And I'm not sitting down waiting for the next dream or vision. That Elohim has given me the ability to understand and see before things become a reality. And in the means of communicating what needs to be done, just like during Christ's time, the information was for those for whom God prepared it. And He alone determines who those people are by giving them eyes to see, ears to hear, and a desire, a sincere desire to know and understand and do. That's something between individuals and God. I don't try to figure that out. I don't try to evaluate it. I don't try to measure it. I have my hands full doing my responsibility as a prophet. You know, I told you, according to the scriptures, and you see the evidence of it, that the true apostles operate in all of the ecclesiastical offices. So in my prophetic capacity, I have the responsibility not only to see, but to communicate appropriately and timely what God desires to communicate to those He's drawing and those who He's calling and those who've been called and are chosen and in the process of executing their and demonstrating their faithfulness. The information is not designed for those people who are clueless and have determined to serve God their own way and their own mechanism and their own system. Those people, the message will not make sense regardless of the history. The things that you see so clearly, they will not see. The things that make sense to you will not make sense to them. And if you waste your time and breath trying to articulate it to them, they'll create labels for you that will make your life even more miserable. I've been saying this for years. Most of you have had to demonstrate and learn by demonstrating to the contrary and experiencing the consequences of doing so. But understand, times are changing and changing rapidly. And I'll be giving information, instruction, recommendations. And for those who hear and heed, it's going to be a blessing. And for those who don't, it's going to be on you. God does not have cross your heart and hope not to die escape plan for those who were there and received the warning and failed to heed. When you fail to heed, your way up is all practical with very little enhancement. For those who are for those who will come and just find out about it, God's going to make provision for them. And they'll be equipped and catch up based on their application. So if you spoil your opportunity and you spoil your time, like the 5 virgins who didn't have oil in their lamps, you'll just be oilless and short and shopping when time comes to take action. And just like in the parable, they said, "Give me of your oil. We don't have enough. We don't have any. Share yours with us." The answer was, I only have enough to do what God's instructing. And I don't know what the provision is going to be down the road. So you had your chance to prepare. Go ahead and prepare quickly and come. That's the reality. As we take our break, what I want you to consider, we talked about prophetic elements. Some of you, and this would be a good group activity, you can form your groups, big groups, little groups, solo, however. I want you to begin to compile what you see as potential prophetic elements in our day and time. So we're taking a jump from the Chaldean Empire, from the book of Daniel, to prophetic elements, or fulfillment of prophetic elements that you see in our day and time. What activities, what action, what situations do you see, past, present, and coming, that are an example of fulfilled prophecies of the past, or elements that will be identifiable when we get to prophecy as it applies to us today? So it's going to involve a little bit of thinking. It's going to involve opportunities of communication. And some people have a little bit more exposure in some areas than others, so it creates an opportunity for interaction that will stimulate and inspire thought and analysis so that you can prepare yourself for our second part of our training session for today. After you after you come up with your list, then what I want you to do is answer the following question. What would you as an individual, what would you as a group, what do you see as your active solution or active response to the prophetic elements that you see, recognize? What do you do about it? You see all these things, and now the next thing is, what do you do about it? Okay? Now it's, let me see, 10 minutes to 11. I'm on West Africa time, so I have to subtract 5 on my watch. So that's what, 10 minutes to 6? Okay. Let's say 7:30. Yes?
You said, what actions, activities do you see, past, present, and coming, that are examples of fulfilled prophecies of the past? And what was the second part?
All right, no, that are potential prophetic elements.
Of the past, and then you wanted us to go...
Past or present.
Past or present.
In other words, if you see these, what do you see in your looking back and looking forward? What do you see as potential prophetic elements? And then, based on those things that you see, what would, could, you do about it. I talked about a bunch of them in our session so that those of you who might not listen to the news or whatever at all would have some things to stimulate your thinking when you get in your groups and you all begin to talk about it, because you know it's a miracle, the miraculous ability that God designed into each of your brains, and that is the ability to capture and permanently record everything that you ever hear, taste, see, smell, etc. The information is in there. What we have to develop the ability to is to identify and go back and retrieve the information when we need to. That's what memory is all about, or recall is all about. So by getting together in a group and discussing these things, there are things that will come back to mind as a result of this exercise that you may not be able to bring back to mind if you just sit in a corner by yourself trying to pull up things just from whatever's echoing in your own head. So this is an exercise where maybe the general frustration of trying to work with a group could pay off. So you want to identify modern time prophetic elements, and then what do you do about it? See what kind of what you see, and then see what kind of solutions you would come up with. All right, everybody understand the assignment? All right, so we'll see you back here at 7:30.
Ain't no game over there.
I'm going to try to see if I can kind of pick up from where I stopped. What I was endeavoring to do is help you see a clear and realistic picture of where we are. We looked at the judicial system, we looked at health, we looked at labor and the jobless situation, we looked at the problems being created now for small business. And someone pointed out that though I talked about this problem with small businesses, that I never talked about what the wonderful opportunity was, and I intentionally saved that for the second half. When you think about the way the system works right now, how this is going to hurt so many and why. it's not only going to hurt the children's toys, clothing / retailers and the used toy and clothing resellers, but it's also going to hurt the big stores, the manufacturers, your Sears and your, I can't even think of the names of the stores here, but the stores where you could go and buy toys. Because nobody, once this becomes effective, unless they make modifications in the law, nobody will be able to sell in the United States to a market of under 12 anything that has not been tested for lead and lead byproducts. So what that means is these big stores that sell toys that would normally take their year-end inventory in clothing and toys and donate them to other organizations for a tax write-off, and then those organizations would sell them, these non-taxable organizations, 501c3 organizations, would then resell those things in the market, like the Goodwill and others. They're not going to be able to do that. They're not going to be able to give them to Goodwill because Goodwill will not be able to sell them. The rescue missions will not be able to sell them. They risk a $100,000 fine and 5 years in prison for doing so. So it creates a wonderful opportunity for us because our ministry is an international NGO. They can make the donations to us and still get their tax write-off. And we won't be selling them or distributing them in the United States. We'll be loading them in containers and shipping them overseas. They don't care about that. That's fine. So we then, if this law passes, we become about the only door for them to dump this stuff in. Now, one of the things that I'm trying to do in the short period that I have left is, and that's one of the reasons for getting the website up, is because I'll create a special place for showing our intervention in this toy crisis arena by providing an outlet so that they don't create another problem in the U.S. as a result of this toy situation. Because without our assistance, all of these toys and all these clothes will go to the dumps. Then the dumps will have a problem because they won't be able to just burn that stuff and put all that plastic smoke in the air. That's against the other local regulations. So we are the most healthful, viable out, and an out that also gives them a tax credit. So we become the alternative to putting brand new stuff in the dump. Let the stuff get redeeming value in another country through 1BLOOD. So that's one of the things that I'll be marketing to all of these store outlets that will potentially have a problem February 10th. So that'll be in the back of their minds, and if such becomes the case, instead of them, after they try to sell everything they sell on the 9th, and I won't be going on the 9th to get discounts, knowing that beginning the 10th, the merchandise is free. I'll wait and let everyone know we're the venue for it. The things that go to the dumps. Initially, the people in the dumps will take things home, but after a while, their house will fill up, and they'll realize that they cannot take them and make them for sale because them reselling them gives them a potential $100,000 fine and 5 years in jail. So then when we go to these collection managers who are collecting all of these new toys and boxes and all of these clothes that might potentially have lead in them because they have not been tested, or all these untested products, and let them know that we are the venue and the alternative, the green alternative to this problem, then our headache one of our headaches will become collecting, loading, and shipping these things out, which would be a nice headache to have. So again, when you understand these things are coming, you can position yourself to be a beneficiary of the blessing. And potentially, I don't know how quickly we get these things in place, but potentially we could be the beneficiary of millions of dollars of products, clothing, etc., that would go into our program where it can do some good to people who will appreciate it in markets where the greed factor is not trying to control yet. And by doing so, we also position ourselves so that anyone wanting to come into that market will have to come in through us. Because when you get that kind of volume of merchandise coming into the country, one of the first things you do is make your distribution program an economic benefit to the government without government regulations. In other words, we will take the things, we'll give away where we need to, we'll sell where we can at a ridiculously low price. We'll create micro industries of people with products that they get ridiculous wholesale to go and sell and make a living. And then we donate a portion of the gross revenue to the government to go into their community development, child improvement, whatever programs. And of course, the government then, seeing you as a source of untied resources, will make sure that nobody messes up your market. So it's a tremendous potential. How it develops and how we'll be able to let's say exploit the opportunity. We just have to, watch and see. But it does make it interesting. So although on one hand it's a real sad situation, on the other hand it creates a very happy opportunity. So a lot of times it's just a matter of perspective. Some people concentrate on the whole, and other people concentrate on the donut. I concentrate on the donut. I'm aware of the whole, but I concentrate on the donut. That's just the kind of guy I am. So that's one of the things that I'll be monitoring, and hopefully once we get the website up, I'll quickly make communication to all of these departments that's going to be having this sad problem, and we'll see what can come out of it. Now, the final area that's going to disaffect this country, and that is adversely disaffecting the world, is the area of food, the food crisis. And I saved that for last because I talked about our health intervention. And mind you, what we're doing is tiny, tiny, tiny scale. The quantity is very small, but the quality and the statistics are very big. So one of the things you will notice on our website when it goes up is that we compare ourselves qualitatively and statistically to others that are doing XYZ rather than quantitatively. By doing so, you'll be hard-pressed to find someone whose record will match ours. And then people looking for a quality intervention alternative, we will rise to number one on the list. And the more people search, the way the search engines work, the more people search and keep pulling up 1BLOOD stuff, the higher 1BLOOD will be in this computerized selection criteria. So whenever people do in 1BL before they finish, 1BLOOD is on their computer. When they hit whatever, ours is on the top of the search engine. So those on our team who will be working in that area will be also charged with the task of making sure that they do the kinds of things that keep us in premium drop-down general search field when it comes to these queries, these internet search queries. Now, when it comes to food, you know, I was looking at some of the current, say 2008 projections, food crisis projections, and they're all very, very bleak. You know, they're keeping track of the system as it goes down, proving that it's sinking. September 7th, 2007, Vietnam, the world's third biggest rice exporter. Who would have thought it? Vietnam, third largest rice exporter, restricts rice exports in order to slow their own inflation. Which means the rice that was going on to the international market from Vietnam is not going on the market in 2009, in 2010, 2011. They're going to use the rice to feed their population and control their own inflation. Argentina, temporarily, December 4th, 2007, temporarily restricts grain exports. Argentina was also exporting rice, wheat, and corn. They restrict their rice exports. December 4th, 2007. January 2008, China, the world's biggest grain producer, starts to curb overseas sales of wheat, corn, and rice by issuing export permits. Export permits is the way that they can control how much goes out of the country, because they also had food riots, because enough of their rice that was being produced was not going to their populace, and they had people who were hungry and starving, yet they were exporting rice to other places. So they created this export permit system so that they could still look like the biggest exporter, but at the same time be restricting exports in order to avert big social problems, food-based social problems internally. January 19th, 2008, Egypt bans rice exports altogether. February 8th, the American Bakers Association asked the U.S. Department of Agriculture to curb wheat exports. Now here's what's interesting. You know that the United States exports rice, wheat, and corn. But you know that we also import rice, wheat, and corn? We import rice, wheat, and corn for our consumption, and we export our crap for other people's consumption. So the people who we were importing from in order to have quality food, edible food in our markets, are not exporting. So we're being forced in 2009 to feed more of our crap to our own people instead of to the folks across the water, as they say. February 27th, at least 4 people are killed during the 3 days of protests over high food commodity prices in Cameroon. March 10th, Philippine authorities begin to crack down on hoarders, the people who are buying up the stuff in volume. You know, I said when I began to encourage you to begin to accumulate your food supplies while there are no active hoarding regulations, those who did so are off the radar. Now, as of September 2008, they began to track how much of those things you're purchasing. Especially if you make the purchases with a credit card. They make permanent records of how much grains you're buying. We had a situation here last year, I don't know if you all are aware of it, but it made international news, when Costco and Walmart went back and repossessed rice that was purchased by some people who bought rice in quantities, because they checked their computers the next day and found out that they bought over the 1 per person limit. And they went with sheriffs and ATF officers and took the rice back from the people, and they did not get the money equivalent. They were in violation of the law when they bought more than their 1 bag. That made international news. It didn't plaster all over the news here. March 17th, India halts all exports of non-basmati rice. It also extends an existing export ban on crops such as peas and beans. Now you'll notice, last year, for those of you who go and shop at the Indian stores, you used to see a wide variety of supply of basmati and non-basmati rice. You go and check those stores now. The non-basmati rice are only the little bags that were not regulated by the ban. You cannot get the 10 and 20 and 30 and 40 pound bags of non-basmati rice, not even from the Indian stores anymore. It's banned from export. They're keeping it in the country to feed themselves. And they're banning their peas and beans. So you'll notice in the Indian stores that were marketing things from India, you'll see that their inventories in America are getting kind of small. March 28th, Vietnam extends rice export restrictions. April 4th, Haitian riots over food prices, at least 3 people killed. April 6th, Egyptian riots over food prices. April 9th, corn commodities on the Chicago Board of Trade reaches $6.16 a bushel. That was like a 10-year high. April 12th, police clashed with 10,000 workers in Bangladesh who smashed vehicles and attacked factories demanding higher wages so that they could pay for food. April 12th also, the Haitian Prime Minister is forced to step down in an attempt to diffuse anger over food prices, and a UN police officer bringing food to his unit in Port-au-Prince is killed. April 14th, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon says that a global food crisis has reached emergency proportions. The World Bank officially forecasts 33 nations from Mexico to Yemen may face social unrest because of food shortage. April 16th, Malawi plans to restrict corn exports. Now, remember, some of you saw in some of the newspapers when I said that it was BS, when the Minister of Agriculture in Sierra Leone, who acknowledged, regrettably, that OneBlood was responsible for 40% of the nation's food security, which was true, but then he lied and said that Sierra Leone was 70% food secure, and that caused a reduction of international food support to Sierra Leone. Well, the new foreign minister announced, quote, it's a new government, to avaz.org, in Sierra Leone, 70% of our people live below the poverty line and cannot afford a meal a day. Between May and September 2008, 90% of Sierra Leoneans will not afford to buy a bag of rice. Our 470,000 bushels fed 10% of the national population. 90% cannot afford to buy rice. 10% didn't need to buy rice. That 10% was One Blood. Now, when you talk about quantitative statistics, what outreach ministry of any church or what international NGO has gone in and developed the capacity to feed 10% of a national population? None. It's never been done. So quantitatively, we have, or qualitatively, we have made modern history records and continuing to grow. As I said before I left, as of the end of November, we had harvested about 2 million bushels under our program, and we'll be harvesting until July. It'll be interesting to see what our stats are by the time we finish. But if we were at 10% at 470,000, it'll be interesting to see what the measurable impact is. Of course, the government of Sierra Leone is still not willing to give us credit, although in the district level of the ministry, where we are, they not only give us credit, they depend on us, and everybody there knows that they depend on us. They know that the southern part of Sierra Leone, southern province, southern part of the country, is eating One Blood rice. They know that. It's just in Freetown in the west that they remain electively clueless or pretend to be. But even the government is aware of it, because after the economic summit, One Blood was on TV every day on all the major channels for about 10 or 12 days. And the parliamentarians, when they were traveling around the country, were talking about, well, this is One Blood, you know, what are they doing? How do they get the capacity? And who controls them? So the current government, in attempting to identify and establish their control so that they could brag, found out that they had no relationship. So while they ignore our existence officially, their statistics continue to confirm our place in the development of the country. That's when what you do matters. It's just a matter of time before the people force the government to recognize. Because 3 years from now, since they don't have a system of development, a system of accumulation, a system of harvesting, since they don't have that, 3 years from now, when we have experienced exponential growth from where we are, the government is going to have to come to One Blood and say, please, we need to buy your rice. The government's going to have to come officially. And it'll be one of those things that we cannot consider until you meet such and such performance requirements. And we will make up for all lost time before they get more than a gesture's worth of rice. I tell you what, we'll put as much as your vehicle can carry for you to take back to Freetown with these requirements. And when these requirements are met and you bring back proof that it's done and we can confirm it on the internet, at that point we can look at providing what's needed or assisting what's needed in a more voluminous way. Things got to the point where they said in Egypt, you couldn't buy or sell without going through Joseph. You see, Joseph just had to manage and expand existing capacity. There was no capacity when we started in Sierra Leone. The capacity that exists because of One Blood. And that's hard for a nation to admit. We've gotten $40, $50 million for food security, and we've got nothing to show for it, and we're having to accept new imported tractors, and we're having to beg this One Blood for seed rice and send them letters requesting food for work for our program, and we are the government. it shouldn't be, so we'll just pretend that it's not the case. Well, their bellies will correct their thinking in about 3 years' time. April 17th, Kazakhstan, the world's 6th largest wheat producer, wheat exporter, bans wheat exports. April 18th, India permits rice exports to Bhutan only. April 20th, Thailand, the world's largest rice exporter, is under pressure to restrict exports. A World Bank official likens any restrictions to Saudi Arabia reducing oil exports. Now, by mid-2008, we'll tape swap here. Discount swap. By middle June, July 2008, what did we know? What were the current statistics? At that point, wheat prices were up more than 120%, doubled plus. Rice prices had risen 75%. Poor families were spending 80% of their budget on food. According to the World Bank, an estimated 100 million people last year fell into poverty. 100 million people worldwide that were not in the poverty line fell into the poverty or below the poverty line. Prices are expected to stay high through 2015. Now, stay high does not mean stabilize where they are. Because if it's stabilized where they are, people will adjust to that. Stay high means it continues to grow so that people are continuing to complain about rising food costs. We're talking about the grains, rice, wheat, and corn, soy, and everything that's connected to them, all of their byproducts. Remain high till 2015. Now, under the United Nations and World Bank's Millennium Development Goals objective, they were supposed to cut world hunger in half by 2015. Now they're acknowledging that food price is going to rise until 2015. So cutting the number of people starving from food in half by 2015 is off the objective charts now. 21 of 36 countries are in food security crisis. 21 of 36 countries in food security crisis are in sub-Saharan Africa, according to the UN. And they say that West Africa and the Horn of Africa, which includes South Africa, and fragile states are especially vulnerable. Now, what's interesting is the world food supply and the world food crisis is continuing to deteriorate. And OneBlood's, the church outreach, is continuing to grow. At some point, the deterioration and the growth is going to meet and then pass, moving in opposite directions. And as soon as that happens, the people who have attitudes against the church and the church's outreach ministry, the attitudes will change. Hunger will change the words in their mouth. Now, even if they dumped the resources, the money, the seed, into some of these other programs to try to accomplish what we are accomplishing, they'll be unable to do so because they don't have the system. They don't have a system. They don't know how to do what we've done. In Sierra Leone alone, in 10 years, we've spent maybe $7 to $8 million in our program. Those of you who don't tithe, don't twist your face. You didn't have much contribution in that. $7 to $8 million. At the same time, in Sierra Leone alone, they've spent $80 million in the same 10-year period. $80 million. They've got nothing to show for it. We've spent $10 million in the region, and we are the go-to guys for seed rice. Now, that's a statistic that they're going to eventually have to admit, because that's a matter of public record. They've gotten the money, full food security, and have nothing to show for it. We've got warehouses full of Nerika seed, which is a seed rice that produces 3 harvests per year. The government, trying to look good, took rice that's not Nerika, planted a field and put signs all over the field saying it's Nerika, to try to impress the World Health Organization and the UN folks when they were coming through looking, and the rice was like this tall. So only an expert could tell what kind of rice it is, and these people from the UN are not experts. These people wouldn't know rice from grass growing in the field. But the rice was this tall, and they have all these signs: Nerika 1, Nerika 2, Nerika 3, up to Nerika 7. And none of it is even Nerika. So they're going back writing these reports saying, on these acres we saw, Sierra Leone will get 3 harvests of Nerika in 2008, 2009 harvest. It won't happen. They'll be lucky if they get 1. Be lucky if they get 1 harvest. Because I didn't walk out in the field and look. I just stopped on the side of the road and stayed in my vehicle. Because I didn't want to walk out in the field and somebody take a picture and then they say, this is where 1Blood is actually getting their rice from. Here's the international CEO in our field. So I don't step in their field. Not 1 foot. In fact, I don't even get out of my vehicle near their field. But we have plenty of pictures of them walking around with me in our fields, on our farms, with their notepads in hands and their cameramen following them. So, but I really doubt that they'll get 1 full harvest of that. 1, they don't have enough machines running to go and to do the work. And 2, they're not paying people to harvest. They're not even paying them, the government's administration. So who's going to harvest the rice? The birds and the rodents. So, that's a joke. And then after they say that field doesn't produce, then 1Blood will come and take that field along the highway. Since they spent all that money turning it into a developed swamp, then we'll go in and we'll plant it and harvest it properly. Now, it's comfortable, a lot of Americans are saying, well, we really don't have to worry about that because that's them on the other side of the world. Not understanding that for years the U.S. has been exporting our junk to them and bringing their good stuff in for us under cover. Well, now, thanks to One Blood, the cover is off. So if they're saying that they won't let us export our rice into their country, then we'll ban anybody else taking our rice into their country. Because what they were doing is coming in and buying the rice and putting it in USAID bags and bringing it back to the U.S. And then that's what they were planting and eating for themselves. So now with that small provision, they pack their USAID bags with USAID rice that they bring right back here, and they test in the lab and found out, wait, this is the same stuff we shipped. Which is what happened in December. So at some point they're going to come back to the table. They're coming to the table, but their pride is in the way. So they're playing a lot of games now, and I'm not making it easy for them. Americans, this is an article from Natural News. Americans are losing the ability to feed themselves. Americans are losing the ability to feed themselves. Nothing signifies this loss of the golden age in America more than our growing reliance on foreign countries for our food. Look at how much of your agriculture, your fresh green commodities in the grocery stores are coming from outside the U.S. Yet Americans happily buy their products from Mexico and their fish from China without giving it a thought. These are the same Americans who bemoan the loss of our manufacturing base, saying we should have done something about it before it was too late. Why can't they see the similarity to us losing our agricultural base? Buying food from the Chinese is no different than buying a Toyota from the Japanese. Both actions portray an American turning its back on its own agricultural system, on its own economic system. You buy food from a foreign country, you enrich the same corporations that have dumped their long-time faithful employees here in America. Why? Because the employees didn't want to work and were always striking. So the corporation moved to countries where people wanted to work. That's why they left. These are the food conglomerates that have shut down factories in the U.S. and created ghost towns where there were once thriving communities. That's what's happened in the heart of what was our agricultural production states and communities. They're the same corporations that show their contempt for Americans by using toxic chemicals and pesticides in their food production that are not allowed in the U.S. Maybe you say, I only buy organic. So I don't have to worry. Here's a question. What does organic mean in Mexico or China? And who enforces those standards? So the reality is, organic means nothing. If it comes from another country and is imported by the USDA or the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, and it says organic, organic means nothing. If this scenario isn't enough, add in government policy to ignore fuel inefficiency of vehicles in the U.S. and instead turn to its attention to rhetoric to the encouragement of using our food for fuel. You almost think it was a plot against the American people. The author has it right, but his heart just can't let him acknowledge what his good sense is pointing out is the obvious reality. You don't have to be a dedicated fanatic to see what's going on. Just pick up a newspaper and you'll find stories that paint a glaring picture of our fall from grace. Like the one in the New York Times about the death of the catfish industry in the U.S. Like, who needs to be eating catfish? Anyway. Last year, Dillard and Company raised 11 million fish. Next year, they will raise none. And 55 more Americans will be unemployed, while the rest of us will be getting our catfish from Asia, where they have 1/3 of the poop of the world to eat. So they get plenty big. With the rising cost of corn and soybeans, feed is now more than half the total cost of raising catfish. The other half is redirecting poop to the catfish beds. The president of Dillard says that for every dollar the company spends raising catfish, it gets back only 75 cents when the fish go to market. Along with other producers, Dillard takes his fish to Consolidated Fish Producers, where they're cut into fillets. With fewer fish coming in, Consolidated is laying off half its workers. Dillard also blames government policy resulting in ethanol mandates. Producers Feed Company across the highway from Dillard's has already shut down. The ripple effect continues at Peterbo's restaurant, locally known for its catfish dinners, but now out of business. Catfish has always been a delicacy that symbolized the parasite-ridden South. Parasite-ridden added. The founder of Dillard's came to the Mississippi Delta 50 years ago and put in a catfish pond. The idea caught on and soon the industry was booming, employing more than 10,000 people at its peak. But producers from Vietnam and China flooded the American market, resulting in the loss of pricing power. Then there's the Associated Press article about the Mexican named Martinez, who used to pay smugglers to sneak him into the U.S. to manage farm crews. Now he's back at home working for the U.S.-owned Veg Packer de Mexico, one of many companies that have turned their backs on American customers, moved their fields to Mexico to take advantage of hands willing to work for half the prevailing rate in the U.S. Willing to work. Who's not going to move to where people are willing to work? From where people are not willing to work to where people are willing to work. American companies now farm more than 45,000 acres of Mexican land with about 11,000 employees, according to a survey quoted in the Associated Press article. U.S. direct investment in Mexican agriculture, including American companies moving operation to Mexico and establishing Mexican partnership, has grown sevenfold to $60 million since 2000. U.S. agribusinesses are also in a position of overrunning the local growers in Mexico and putting them out of business, much as they have been doing in the U.S. for decades. A story in Tulsa World tells us that cattle in feedlots is at its lowest level since August due to record high feed and fuel costs coupled with massive flooding in the Midwest that took out about 5 million acres of farmlands earlier this summer. It looks bleak for the fall when cattle ranchers can no longer rely on grass in their pastures to cushion high feeding prices. High prices for feed affects every part of the food chain, from crop to consumer, with higher prices all along the way. Placements of cattle into feedlots to gain weight for slaughter are down over the long term, with May's placement totaling only 40,000 head, the second lowest monthly figure in more than a decade. Cattle inventories are at some of their lowest levels since the early 1960s as a result of the squeeze between higher feed costs and the ceiling of what feedlot operators will pay. Again, the government policy to encourage the use of ethanol for food is cited as a determining factor. Cattle ranchers see their future as resting in the hands of what consumers will pay, and it doesn't look good. You know, you want to tell people that steak costs you twice as much now because the guys that used to provide the corn in the food lot sold this corn to produce ethanol. So then he had to pay twice as much for corn, cost him twice as much to feed the cow. Now you pay twice as much for steaks. And the folks say, I'm going to leave it on the shelf in the store. Then the store has to mark it down 50% to sell it before it goes bad. And then the next lot, they say, I didn't make money off the last one. You got your price or you keep your cow. I mean, it's very practical. The solutions are practical. The problems are practical. Americans who have left any footprints in foreign countries are being contacted to ask as go-betweens, as foreign investors need intermediaries to contact real estate brokers of farmlands not in the U.S., but worldwide. That's some of the opportunities that I was talking about when I said now there's money chasing people who have contacts, viable contacts and development, provable development in West Africa, from the U.S. and Europe. Because they realize that the market and opportunity for profits is almost gone in America. Meanwhile, the Wall Street crowd has turned its attention to farming in order to harvest a crop of fat profits. Crop price manipulation has long been a mainstay of speculators, but now we've got hedge funds and venture capital amassing billions of dollars from global investors wanting to own farmland, and all the commodities involved in food production, transport, and storage. They can't call it owning structure. Americans who've left, their goal is price control. With big size and deep pockets, these investment groups can almost corner the markets in corn or any targeted commodity, store it long enough to force prices into huge advances. In the process, any small-time operator can be bought to his knees. And since these funds own the mechanisms of transport and fuel, they're also in position to move the commodity to whatever market is paying the most for it. Right now, on the high seas, there is no rice for sale. January 2009, on the high seas, there is no rice for sale. Normally, there are 5 or 6 shiploads of rice on the high seas waiting for a radio dispatch to go drop their load at this country or that country where they get the best price of sugar, rice, corn, wheat, and soybeans are always on the high seas. And they just direct them. They'll call, they'll get a commodities purchase contract, and they'll radio, and the ship will take it to wherever, because it's sold. There's none for sale. There's more money chasing rice and more money chasing grain internationally than there is product. So our little 2 million, 4 million, 6 million, whatever we do this year, is a tiny, tiny drop in the bucket. But here's what makes a difference. And we'll look at this when we start looking at our intervention, our strategy. What's making the difference is what they're buying is gross volume, poor quality, and it's going down. Both the quality and the availability is going down. Our little bit is high quality, and the volume is going up. So at some point they'll meet, and at some point they'll pass each other. Now, here's what, well, I'll get to that. I'll get to marketing position and all that later. What can you do about all this? Can you start by increasing your awareness of where food, you can start by increasing your awareness of where food comes from. This is fairly easy to do since most produce and packaged meat carries identification of the country of origin. Then you can tell your grocer that you're unwilling to spend your hard-earned money on advancing the standard of living for another country. Wrong. You go into the store with your money, you're hungry, you've got a budget. The American-made steak is $27, and the steak from Venezuela is $13, and you're going to tell the folks, look, get these $13 steaks out of here, I'm not going to buy them. No, what's going to happen is you'll say, look, I need to buy these $13 steaks in quantity. You know, I want to buy it in bulk. You know, this is their solution to the problem, and it doesn't even make sense. It's not based on reality. You can go to weekend farmers markets events and support your local growers. Okay. The average person going to the store, how are they going to get to a farmer's market and having to walk to the neighborhood store? Again, that's not even practical. You can walk 27 miles to a farmer's market to save $3 on an item rather than walk to the corner. You know, because the farmers markets are not in the heart of the big cities. It's on the outskirts. So you'll see the interstates full of people walking. I don't think so. Not until there's no petrol for vehicles, then we'll start walking like the rest of the world. But until then, oh wait, we'll swap tapes on that.